Middle Ages in Europe, there were some very interesting writings. One was called The Cloud of Unknowing. Isn't that a fascinating title? The Cloud of Unknowing, in which you were to enter. Not bad. The second book, and in my estimation, a better book, is called The Book of Privy Counseling. You all know what privy means, of course. You're in the know. And interestingly, there are certain declarations, assertions in those books that you might say are parallel with yoga. Both of them were by Christian authors, and they were monks. Now the book's purpose were manifold. One of the first assertions was to provoke an awakening. And they were very, very interestingly grounded in very practical beginnings, in the sense that they took the normal questioning that we all have about the meaning of life, even as we're becoming familiar with it, and quite reasonably we try to understand, well, what is the final goal or purpose? Now there was a man called St. Augustine who tried to answer that question by asserting, quote, "Our hearts are restless until they find peace in thee." Now, to achieve this ultimate meaning of life, the first part of the journey, according to the Christian mystics, was to engage yourself at the tangible level of daily existence. The body, the passions, the social relations, the various appetites for life itself, and to study these and modify them, adjust them. And the entire process was called a path of asceticism, in which the aspirant now struggles to build new habits and remold old ones. Caution, of course, is urged because the passions, which are so much a part of our nature, are actually the strongest forces which the body employs with its contact with life. But conquering the passions is not the hallmark of development. Instead, one is to slowly modify them by first understanding their nature in the various concrete operations of daily living. In doing so, one brings them more and more under the directing action of intelligible living. The purpose then of asceticism is not to restrain them, but simply to bring them under a creative control so that they can be expressions of reason's directions. Among the Greeks, this coordination was called virtue. Virtue, or vir, is the Latin word for power. So by bringing one's powers under reasonable guidance, one develops the life force into a certain maturity, which means increased freedom, and at the same time opens to further questions about the ultimate significance of reality. So the common ground between yoga and the Christian mysticism is a concern with human development. Life is meant to be a training ground. And one continues to examine the more refined areas of interest and the human personality. Often in yoga we talk about the yamas and niyamas. And we find them an interesting parallel with the virtues that were recommended by the Christian mystics. Okay. Hopefully, as we continue the practice of integrating our passions with our insights, we begin to understand more accurately what the purpose of life is. Now, one of the major practices that one has to develop is called meditation. There was a woman, a Spaniard, by the name of Teresa Avila. She was considered a saint. And she remarked one day about meditation that no matter how advanced you feel you are in your spiritual progress, you should never give it up in your quest for the ultimate. So, Teresa pointed out that while we go through our own inner exploration of who we are, where we're going, what's the best way, she insists that we have to go beyond the discursive level where we employ ourselves in self-examination. She says we must get to the very center of our person. And that center is not discursive. It's not reasoning. It's got nothing to do with intellectuality. And to back her up, there's a medieval text in the Book of Privy Counseling that says, quote, "I know you want to see God. I know you have been offering prayers and singing psalms and doing many things. But now I want you to reject all thoughts, whether they be good or evil. I want you to reject anything so that nothing remains in your mind, I love this one, save a naked intent stretching out. I only want you to keep a simple awareness that you are as you are. Do not fill the mind with content or images. I want you to leave your thoughts quite naked, your affections and emotions uninvolved, and yourself simply as you are, so that the grace may touch and nourish you with the experiential knowledge of God as God really is. Not bad, huh? The author continues. This is an interesting part. No doubt then, when you begin this practice, your undisciplined faculties, which you all have, will demand that you take up something more worthwhile. Which means, of course, something more suited to them. You are now engaged in work so far beyond the accustomed activity of the mind, the imagination, and the emotions that they think you're wasting your time. Yeah. Explain meditation to people in a corporation. But their dissatisfaction is actually a good sign. How about that? Since it proves you're going to something of greater value. So don't be troubled by them. If your faculties rebel to want you to give them up, you will gradually master them by refusing to feed them despite their rage. So keep yourself recollected and poised in the deep center of your spirit. And don't wander back to working with your mind under any pretext, no matter how sublime. How about that? Does that sound like yours? So, our normal inner restlessness and questioning beckons us to search within. How strange that search, that inner search, at first seems so empty and intangible. And yet, this is the indispensable means to self-discovery. But there's no rushing this investigation. St. Teresa reminds us, one makes progress by calmness. The process is self-knowledge signified by tranquility. And from that we can bring an inner peace that will abide in our workaday world. And that will even generate more energy for our normal task of living. We are to maintain a kind of union of opposites, an unruffled peace amidst the pressures of everyday living and fulfilling our normal duties. And what is the final goal? The ultimate meaning of our nature. Yoga describes this as an experience called samadhi. Christian writers describe it as mystical union. They often choose marital metaphors whereby the soul is wedded to the divine spouse. This terminology reflects the cultural milieu of the times of the writers. But the meaning conveys a state of completion, a freedom from suffering and ignorance. No more questions. And of course, this is shrouded in mystery. What does mystery mean ultimately? There's too much intelligibility for the reasoning mind to comprehend. It's as though the brightness of the wisdom blinds the mind, which is too weak and limited in its view. It suffers from nearsightedness. But with meditation, the eye is healed to experience the inherent dignity that is our nature. And then what will happen? That awareness now begins to unify us with others. We cleanse our egotism, increasing our compassion for the needs of others. And every spiritual tradition speaks of this as a rebirth, so that the aspirant is born into an inheritance that is shared with all, an inheritance to know and love unlimitedly. Anybody want to repeat that? How about that? Well, we have a special illumination prepared for you tonight, in spite of your discursive ways. My friend, we await. As a result of this surprise, you may be carried away to your own mystical state. But we'll watch out for you, so you won't get hurt.
So we'll see how this goes. This is like spontaneous tunes. And Swamiji heard me playing in the room. Which is something I do at home.
Encore.
Oh, my cloud-colored Christ, come. Oh, my cloud-colored Christ, come. Oh, my Christ. Oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my cloud-colored Christ, cloud-colored Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, oh, my Christ, please, Christ, come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Okay, gang. Now stump the Swami. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about this chakra, like your throat? Is that a chakra?
Yeah, how many hours do we have? Okay, we can go.
3 to go.
Okay. In my years of investigation, I find it endlessly fascinating how spirit and matter come together. Because we're both matter and spirit, but we're living matter, not like this piece of wood, piece of paper. So our embodied spirit, embraces our total flesh and exerts its presence through all our organs, especially using our nervous system, which carries the vitality that keeps us alive. Now, I pondered the question is, why do we have to depend upon nature when the spirit is totally independent of depending on anything but itself? The spirit is immortal. It can never die. So why didn't it make the body that way? Okay. Got an inkling one day. You as an individual cannot stay an embodied spirit in your strict individuality. You are dependent. You need the atmosphere. You need occasionally the rain. You need the warmth of the sun. You need the yield from nature, the food. And I thought to myself, why? Why did it set it up that way? And then it finally hit me. In the activity whereby we have to engage nature and foster a relationship with nature in order to survive, in that way we learn about nature. And by learning about nature, we learn about ourselves. Without nature, you could never understand yourself. It's not possible. Because without nature, you die. So the first law of your being is self-preservation. We want to stay alive. We want to enjoy the sunlight. We want to enjoy living amongst people. But to do that, you have to establish relationships with nature. And in that establishment, nature reflects more about you at the same time that it discloses itself to you. I thought, that's interesting. It's a gain-gain proposition then. Where do you get your food? From nature. If you didn't have food, you'd die. But at the same time, nature goes beyond just, I might say, the level of longevity. Nature reveals itself also in beauty. I mean, can you imagine Minnesota without its snow? Have you ever walked in a soft falling snow at night and there's no wind and all the stars are out and it's just falling slowly? It's radiant. So nature teaches us contemplation. A sunset, a sunrise, the beauty out there right now. Can you imagine living without any of that? Your life would be very bleak. So nature not only fosters life for us, can also be a guardian, but it inspires us to go beyond. Who created nature? Is she self-governing? Who put the order in nature? Why do we have seasons? So these questions provoke in you a self-inquiry which reminds you of your own power of intelligence. So nature provokes you to question why. Did you know every snowflake is a hexagon? A hexagon. And it takes two requirements to make snow. Moisture and temperature. The sky is full of unmanifested snow right now. Totally unmanifested. And if that temperature of the sky and the moisture reaches a certain level, guess what happens? Poof, flakes come. And then when the flakes melt, where does the evaporation go? Right back up to remind you of infinity. The cycle of return. It's endless. So you see, nature can teach us so much about ourselves and the meaning of ultimate reality. So it's an endless source of investigation. And how many planets do we have? Really? Only that many? Is there other life somewhere in the universe? And how vast is the universe? Where is the edge? We don't know. Because nature is the major inspiration for infinity. And in a sense, the power of nature is in us as our consciousness. Because like nature, our consciousness is infinite. But we don't know that yet. Just like we don't know the edges of nature. But think for a moment. From the moment you were a child, what did you do more than anything else besides disobey your parents? You investigated reality, nature. And you never stopped. If you stop, you're going to die. You become old and decrepit. And this is what our tradition discovered. Swami Rama's tradition is the oldest yoga tradition in the world. All yoga started from our monks. And so, if you were to join their monastery, you would completely devote yourself to reality. And the reality would be the miniature world, the microcosm. Who was that? That's you. And as you began to investigate yourself, there was a hidden surprise and reward. The more you understood yourself, the more power you had over what you discovered. For example, Dan showed you how to rebalance yourself. You could not do that without knowledge, without consciousness. But in the act of following out your consciousness, you achieved your goal. In other words, you regained power over yourself, your balance. And so that goes on and on endlessly. Swami Rama could thus know things that we can't know without our iPhone. In other words, you one day will achieve the status whereby the moment you have an intent, it will manifest. You already have hints of that in yourself, your intuition. Sometimes you think of some person and what happens? The phone rings and guess who's on that phone? How'd you know that? Because you were meant to. You were aware of their thoughts of you. They reached you no matter how far the distance. Now just keep multiplying that and expanding on that. That's why nature is so important. She is here to promote your own self-discovery. When you walk among the trees, they're healing you. I'm dead serious on that. They radiate their energy, which is compatible with yours, and it's meant to heal you both physically and emotionally. At the same time, your healthy energy is radiating to them to stimulate their progress. I always tell people, if you're raising flowers, spit on them occasionally. They love it. If you're going to plant a garden, put a lot of your mucus into that ground because the DNA of those plants will come and fit you. If it's a crop to be absorbed. So the more we probe, because that's what our consciousness can do, we not only get information, but we get enrichment, which is something much more. We were in India one day with Swami Rama, and we were going to go hear him give a famous talk on a feast day. We were literally thousands of people. And I noticed as we drove along the side of the mountain, it was raining all around, but not on us. I thought, that's interesting. So you know where mine went. What's he up to now? We were perfectly dry. Rain all around us, encircling us. And it just stayed that way. We went, 10 miles along the road along the mountain, and we parked. Thank you. Let there be light. How about that? He's peeking in now. So I teased him about it. Swam, thanks for keeping us dry. He says, he just smiled. It had to rain. I didn't want to stop nature, he told me just. But I didn't want it to rain on you guys. So I put a cloud of protection, a cloud of unknowing all around you. No, you're going to get that to that level one day. In this life, why not? See, in our tradition, gang, you're all meant to get to that level now, in this life. So start having those ambitions. And how do you fulfill that ambition? In 3 words. Practice, practice, practice. Does that answer your question?
I guess.
At least partially. Huh?
Thank you.
He just gave a whole lecture on Sri Vidya
Yeah.
to you.
Now, back to the chakras. I was talking about the third eye.
Yeah.
Now, why do they call it the third eye? Because it's a discernment. Because that's what your eyes are for, not just to see colors or shapes, but to discern what's there that I'm witnessing, that I'm seeing. Now, this is the highest chakra, not the top one. Let me explain that. The top one is not a chakra, technically speaking, because chakras are meant to open up and enrich you in the body. You hit this one, you're out of the body. You don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I want to stay in the body. It's so much fun. Now, there's a versatility. It's almost like a palette with different colors. This is the one to know. This is the one to create. How about that? And this one can take you all the way too. So here at the throat is where we create. Because what do you do when you eat your food? You're creating life in you. So it reflects it even in a crude way. Now let's drop down. The heart. It's not actually the heart, it's slightly to the right of the heart. Right dead center between the breasts. This is the one that just gives compassion. This is the lover. But the lover also needs the intelligence to love rightly. This is the one, I'll give you a concrete example. If you're interviewing for a job, hang on, and you really want the job, and you're talking to the interviewer, talk from here, not here. Talk from the heart. The energy will affect the person differently of your words. So whenever I want to get something out of you, I always talk from the heart. Uh-oh, I'm in for it now.
You're in trouble.
I am. So I want to have dinner on Sunday.
You'd be able to see a beacon from where it's swimming.
You didn't hear that from me. I'll deny it. So what's down here? This is the energy. We use the word, you gotta gut it through. Our own crude terminology already knows that. If you really want to push something hard, you push from here. Not up here, not in the shoulders, here,
It's the solar plexus.
the solar plexus. Now, interestingly, too, the symbol of the energy here is a triangle with flames shooting up. Why? How do you digest food? You have to heat it up. So this is what heats, churns all the food, the solar plexus. This is where you digest food. Therefore, if you have stomach problems, what do? You concentrate on the chakra. You can either picture it, because everything has a certain rhythm, everything has a certain shape. So you can consider the shape in your imagination, or you can repeat the sound of that shape, which is Ram. R-A-M, Ram. In Sanskrit, A is like a U. And if you say that to yourself, not out loud, no power out loud, internally, that will stir the fires. It will also heal ulcers. I'm going to charge more next week.
How often would you have to do that?
Every day until you start to feel the healing coming along nicely, then maybe you can let up. Okay?
Swamiji, why does it not have power if you say it out loud?
Because it goes off. You want to contain it, contain yourself. And you get all the force. Otherwise you share the force, you don't want to lose some of it. Yes, sir.
This is kind of an unrelated question,
Then you shouldn't ask
but
it.
someone that's born blind,
Yes.
can they ever see nature just, by
Yes.
reading about
Yes.
it or whatever, just through their
Yes.
imagination?
I met a blind man who could see me. Let me give you the example. We once went to a celebration in India called the Kumbh Mela. It means the gathering of souls. It's like a baptism into the Ganges. And Swami was the leading speaker. And while we were there, over a period of about 3 or 4 days, we lived in tents on the beach. Swami arranged for us to go visit interesting people. So I just couldn't wait. I was so excited. Because I knew they were going to be very, very interesting people. He wouldn't waste our time. So we went to this one man. He was probably in his 70s, husky, gray-haired, wearing his shawl, and he welcomed us in. And there was something about him that I couldn't quite figure out what. So I really started to pay attention to this guy. He sat us down, took everybody, shook their hands, and he said namaste, the usual greeting. And when he sat down, he said, "It's time for chai." What else do you do in India but drink chai? So he handed us the cup individually, and he came in and he poured. And when he got up close, I looked at him, I said, "This man is blind." His eyes were blank. He didn't make one mistake. Now, how did he do that?
Third eye?
Third eye. I
Was
said,
he-
wow. And he picked up on me, he said, he just smiled, meaning, you found out. didn't you?" Right away, you can't get anything past these guys, or women. So, you mind if I tell you more stories?
No,
I think I really need a cup of chai.
Would you like?
Would you, you know how to
Are you
make it?
gonna?
Yeah.
You're gonna do your thing to me right now? Yeah.
She knew I was gonna ask that.
Yeah.
She brought some special chai for us,
Yes.
gang. You're missing it, you only got another day to get it. It's in the refrigerator.
My attention's not there. I haven't noticed it.
All right. I'll talk loud so you can hear it, Carol. So we had a wonderful time with this guy. He had a good sense of humor. And I was dying to ask him, when did all this happen? But I didn't want to. And he kept chuckling at me, knowing he was reading my mind. And I finally one day asked Swamiji, I said, when did this happen to this guy? He said, when he was a very, very young man. He unfortunately blinded himself. But he was studying yoga at the time, and his guru blessed him and gave him the third eye, touched him, opened up all the energy inside. Now, below the solar plexus is another chakra that's shaped like a moon, the beginning of a moon. And that takes care of your kidneys, all the water in you, the fluids. It sees that they remain healthy. So if you ever get a pain in your kidney, you go to that chakra and either imagine it or it has its own sound. Vam. And finally, there's the bottom chakra, where most of you are at.
So we can walk upright.
And that's what keeps you centered in life. Very important one. And that's lama. Now this will open up all my chakras that I'm about to have, and I can tell you more stories. Thank you, sweet. Very good. However, I need a little sugar. Give me a spoon. I brought my own good sugar.
Oh no, it's sugar.
Sorry, Mr. Gross, not all sugars are the same.
That bag was full yesterday.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you. She
I'm
will.
sorry, Swami, you
Do
had to
you
tell
want
him
me
you.
to take the spoon back when you're done?
That's not necessary.
Okay.
So hold on, gang.
Good, you know.
Can't dare let any of this escape. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Can you take your bag of sugar and hold it?
No, you don't.
Good try.
Thanks. Let me put it here.
That's cute. For honey in it.
I put maple syrup.
Yum, yum. Okay, so while we were there at the Kumbh Mela, It was hard to sleep because all night long people would chant.
Lovely.
From midnight to 6 in the morning. And they dance around fires. So I had to get up one night at 1 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. I said, I gotta find out what's going on here. So I walked about 100 or 200 yards and just watched all these crazy people running around, holding their malas, and I said, well, it's the famous celebration. It's like 4th of July or something, So then I went back. I slept okay. So then the next day, Swami says, I want to have you go up to a man who's in the mountains. There was a mountain right by the sand there. So we walked up and we went into a cave. And he welcomed us. He knew we were from Swami Rama, otherwise we couldn't have gotten in the cave. And we had a nice chat with him. Pleasant fellow. Nothing unusual that I could spot. So then we returned. And then we were supposed to go to another guy. And suddenly I had an intuition. This is not good. And I tried to suppress the thought. I said, why should I be thinking that when Swami Rama would be arranging things? But I didn't feel right. We got there and he was down about 150 yards, sitting in a tent, and we were told, a young man went up to tell him that these are students of Swami Rama. And we weren't invited down. Besides, I didn't want to go. I said, there's something going on here. Well, I just filed it away. And we went back. And then we were told tomorrow we were going to meet a man who's 300 years old. I said, I'm from Missouri. I said, fine. When are we going to meet him? 5 in the morning. I don't want to go. I'm in Samadhi. I can't get out at 5 in the morning. We got up. Oh, God. Do you know it's 85 degrees at 5 in the morning in India? It's as bad as Texas. So we got up and we walked and we walked. It must have been 3 miles. And I was just roasting. 5 in the morning, it's 85 degrees. The sun's up, So we got to the area and there were probably 300 people. And in the middle was a one-room cabin on stilts. And you could reach the edge by extending your hand. And there was a small, what would you call it? Small fence, about 2 feet up. And inside was a single cabin. Maybe 12 by 6. And I'm saying, I came all this way in 85-degree heat in the morning. What's going on? And our guide ushered us right to the front, where we were below the little porch. We got all the glares from the Indians. Who are these Americans that think they can rush up there? And I said, no, they don't like it. I don't blame them. So suddenly somebody tooted a horn. I said, well, this is interesting. He says, he's coming out now. I said, yeah? I was directly below, where he would come out the door, and I maybe was 6 feet only to the edge. And suddenly, a scrawny arm came over the edge, and a face popped up, and he looked directly at me. He had blue eyes. That shocked me. And suddenly, you won't believe this, I said, I know him. And he smiled at me. I said, what's going on here? You know, now my mind was, come on. I need an answer. He gave a very brief talk, maybe 2 minutes, and then he said, I'm going to bless everybody. And I said, I don't need any blessings, I want a shower. So he told us to squat down. Oh, shoot. I'm down. You know, the heat coming off from the sand? Oh, God. You know, it's just... I didn't exactly love life at that point. So he tells us to say the mantra. Oh, I don't want to say it.
Oh, no, I'll start chanting.
So we got to chant the mantra with him. Oh. I want to go home and go into the ocean or something. And suddenly, he says, okay, he blesses us, and he goes back into the cabin. He says, you people can get up. And then it happened to me. When I got up, it's as if I left all my misery, negativity, criticism on the sand. I felt as if I just came out of a nice cool shower. I started to run back to the camp. I couldn't stop it. I had so much energy. And then I thought, how did that happen? So I had to rush back to Swamiji. I said, come on, you got to tell me. He started laughing. He says, yeah, you were his student a couple of lives ago. Really? Yes. He remembered you. And you remembered him. Go on. Yep. He gave you a gift. He took all that away from you, all that fatigue, and he refreshed you. Not bad. I understand he died only a few years ago. Excuse me, he left his body a few years ago.
Do you remember his name, Swamiji?
Devashabhava.
Very good.
Thank you.
What about the one you had the bad feeling about?
Ooh, that's a good story.
So there are two of them, the bad feeling one and the one that was a very nice guy.
Yeah,
I have a feeling they're connected.
okay. You can go back to your room. I'm going to tell them they want more stories. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Good night,
Good
Good
night.
night. Sleep tight.
She's heard them all before.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, I didn't get a chance to ask Swamiji. But a short time later, we heard of somebody who was killing the yogis in the valley which comprised Swami Rama's ashram. I thought, how strange. Why would he be killing the yogis? One day, Swamiji was out gardening or something, and this guy came up to kill Swamiji. But Swamiji always had a guard who lived on the campus with him. And he's what they call a Gurkha. And the Gurkha leaped on this guy and began to choke the life out of him. And Swami came over and had to pry his arms apart. And they took him to jail. He was attempting to kill all the Swamis in the area and take over. And we picked up the negativity in the man.
Swamiji, how was he so successful at that, if he had such malicious intent?
I can't fully answer that. I would say that he was very clever, conspired in such a way that he disguised himself. And maybe these yogis just weren't that advanced yet to spot it. This is very good.
Did he kill the nice guy that you'd met earlier? Or was that
No.
part of the story?
No, he never did.
I thought there was a connection there.
Not.
I thought he did.
He had guards all around his place.
Okay.
There's always competition, huh? Now, at the same time we were there, we received an invitation, thanks to Swamiji, to visit a remarkable woman. What's her name? Ann?
Anandamaya Ma.
Anandamaya Ma. I had heard about her. She and Swamiji were very good friends. They had such a gracious respect for each other. He always talked about her in enduring terms. I said, interesting woman. I'd like to meet her. Naturally. So one day he said, you've been invited. She's going to give a blessing in an auditorium. And they've made room for our gang. There were about 50 Americans. And by the way, this is when I met Gene Pilsner from Madison and Maynard Speech.
And David.
And David, yeah. We'll tell him about that one. So we were walking again in the 85 heat, you know. Oh God. Gotta go see a holy woman now, you know. I said, I want a shower. You can keep the holy woman, you know. So in my usual holy mentality, we strolled along, and Dr. Arya, Swami Veda, kept encouraging us to move along, and I kept wanting to go over and hit him. Mind your business, you'll get there. So I was in a very, holy mode. As we entered the tent, my eyes went to the stage, and suddenly she appeared. And at that moment, I forgot all I was thinking about. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel angry. And I could feel that I was just thinking of something, but it suddenly went blank. Oh well. So I got fascinated with the woman. There was just a charm about her that just glowed. And she unfortunately spoke only in Sanskrit, but she had a British interpreter. And then the British interpreter did something I really admired. Right before she came out, all the men, the Indians and the Americans, rushed up to the front. Excuse me. This is very good. That was a burp, not a belch. And the woman who was Swiss came out and said, gentlemen, only the ladies sit up front. You go to the rear. I loved it before. And I didn't mind being in the rear at all, because I could see her. So we were back about 100 yards. And she came out and she just had a glow. A radiance. It was hard to be palpable, but it was there. I could sense it. And I thought, my God, who is this woman? And she gave a beautiful talk. And she thanked us, being students of Swami Rama, which I thought was very gracious. And then Dr. Arya wanted to give her a bouquet of flowers. And he didn't know who to choose, so he grabbed Teresa. And she thought, Oh, no, not, go, you have to. So she came up and she walked right up into Anandamaya Ma's presence, face to face, and she gave her the flowers. And Anandamaya Ma took the flowers. You could see she probably put a blessing on them. She said, wait. She gave them back to Teresa. Now hang on. I said, there's something about those flowers. 2 years later, well, these were cut roses. They never wilted. Never. So they were blessed. I kind of like that woman. Postscript. She would visit Rishikesh very often, which is the town where Swami Rama's ashram was, outside of it. And it was an apartment house. And they gave her the penthouse at the top. And nobody could live there. That was hers. So when she came to town, this is where she would receive people and bless their children, new babies or a pregnant mother and so on, if somebody had an ailment. But you were allowed to go up there and you could sit. So I said, I want to go up there. So we went up there and I said, which is her favorite room? Zoom, I went into it. And boy, did I have a meditation. It was just full of energy, and off you went. So that, I think it's still there.
What's her name, Swami? Amanda Maya
Ma.
Ma.
Anandamaya.
Ananda, yeah?
She's on the cover of the Daughters of the Goddess, our book.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
that's her on the cover.
Thank you.
Another story. In St. Paul, we have a very large grocery store called Kowalski's. Its home office is in Woodbury. The store that started out was the one on the west side near me. It was a block from where I lived. And they're very friendly people. And I got to know them pretty much. And somehow they found out that I taught yoga. And they wanted to find out what that is. So I said, well, why don't we treat it from the aspect of wellness? I said, okay. And so I met Jim Kowalski and we hit it off quite well. And he invited me to teach wellness to all his employees, every department. And that's what I did. And Jim decided to go to India 1 year with me. I've only been to India 27 times. So when we were in India, I was telling him about the Ganges River, that it's considered holy. And it starts way up in the mountains. And it flows all the way down the entire country. And people swim in it, ride boats in it. And I told them they even use it as a funeral parlor. In other words, when somebody dies, they put them into the Ganges. It's a sacred river, so they figured it'll go right to the gods. And he didn't believe that. So I just laughed. So one day we were in the Ganges and he had just a swimming suit on. So he was playing around in the water. And I happened to walk by and I say, hey Jim. Who's your friend by your left leg? The floating body right next to him.
And it's bloated.
Oh,
yes.
That was funny.
Do they still do that,
Oh,
do you suppose?
Oh yeah, you're not gonna change that custom. That goes back hundreds of years. The police don't want you to do it.
Right.
They'll pay a penalty, but they still do it. One more story. This is one of my favorites. There's a town about 12 miles south of Rishikesh called Hardwar. And it's a town that has all kinds of celebrations throughout the years. Every week there's a celebration of some sort. And I went to a couple of them, especially the most interesting one is the fire ceremony, where they take candles and they put them on little tiny planks of wood and they float them down the Ganges. And the priest blesses them. And you're to put all your petitions on those candles. Very interesting. And there's a lot of noise and cymbals. So one night the gang decided they wanted to go and they naturally wanted me to come and say, no, I've seen it. You've seen it once, that's all you need. I don't want to hear all those sounds and stuff. You guys go ahead, I'm going to stay here. So it was about 9 o'clock at night. I went walking along the top of the Ganges, the parapet. I knew Swamiji was up in his room, but I didn't want to bother him. And I looked across, because sometimes you could see an elephant come down to the water and drink. You could actually swim across the width there. It's about maybe 75 yards. And suddenly I remembered a story as I was sitting on the Ganges like this, looking across, about 9 o'clock at night, beautiful night, stars all over. I remembered the first chairman of the Institute, Ann Elbert, had come to India with Swamiji. She told me all about the story. And she was sitting up in his apartment and she was looking across the Ganges as I was looking down by the parapet. And suddenly she saw a globe of light. In fact, she saw two of them come down, floating and dipping into the water and sort of bouncing. And she said, they're almost transparent, but they're translucent or something. She said, Swami, what are they? She said, oh, they're the devas. She said, what's a deva? It's a spiritual being who never embodies, but he's more powerful than any human being. He's almost as powerful as the monks in my tradition. In fact, they're so, at times, a little ordinary, we can't control them. Oh, okay. So they dipped down and then they vanished. And I'm sitting there thinking, boy, I'd love to see a deva. Boom! Right in front of me. And he was going like this. You know, it was like a translucent blanket. And he was sort of waving at me. I said, well, hi, I'm Justin O'Brien. It's so nice to meet you. And I'm so glad you came. Really, I'd like to get to know you. Would you just, do you mind if I make a request? Could you move to the right? I did this mentally, not out loud. I said, we're going to go back to the center and go back to the left. Go on. Go back to the center, go up. Go down. Go around. Just have fun. So he went, and then, he vanished. I said, wow, I can talk to the devas.
Was it male or female? Did you have a sense of
No, neutral,
which? Neutral?
Probably.
or maybe combined, you know?
Mhm.
So naturally, I had to go up and see Swamiji. I had to barge in on him. So I ran upstairs, and he's sitting there with a big grin on his face. Swamiji, you'll never guess what. Yeah, I know, you saw David. He was watching us. They came to greet you. Wow. Boy, I'd love to have these guys on my side.
You probably do.
Thank you. Maybe. Anyway, I have to tell you a sad tale. When we were building Glenview, and Swami came to America back in the early 70s, one of Swami's students' husband was a contractor. And he said, I'll get a discount on the supplies that help build your place, refurbish it. Huh? So we thought, wow, what a break. I was in charge at the time because Swamiji had gone back to India and another gentleman had quit being the administrator, and Ann Elward didn't know what to do because she was running a restaurant. And she said, will you help me, Justin? I said, sure. So between the two of us, we tried to keep things rolling along. Excuse me, this is really good. Until Swamiji came back. So this was in October, November, and I brought Davy or Teresa in as my secretary. And she'd be there all day, and I'd go teach at oil, and then I'd come back and stay there till midnight. Well, anyway, he was getting us supplies, as he pointed out, at a discount. And so finally, we have to tell you, we had an electrician who was a very devoted student of Swamiji, very trustworthy man, Joe Lubinek. And Joe was putting in all the electricity. And down the halls, he was putting in light after light. He had so much brightness you could operate in that room, in the hallway rather. And I said, Joe, that's enough lights, please. Pace them a little more. We don't need this much light. And one day, he looked weary, and I saw him go over, and he drank what do you call it?
Thermos?
Thermoses. And then one day, Teresa started to get a little worried because she'd been typing and working. And he said, Teresa, here, take this. She took it and she just snapped right back to the light. And of course, I watched and I said, something's going on here again. Joe, come here. What's in this stuff? He didn't want to tell me. Joe, we're friends. I'll keep it between us. It's a thermos of china. Yeah. What else? Well, when Swamiji left, he handed me this thermos bottle. It was bubbling over with china. He said, if anybody gets weary or tired or look like they got a cold, give them this. Give it to them every day. At the end of the day, Joe, you take the thermos home and you leave it on your kitchen table. Don't touch it. Don't open it up. Just leave it there. And every day it filled itself somehow.
Is that tilk also called tilk?
Tilk,
It's
right.
chai.
It was tilk. Tea made with a lot of milk. Okay. So then he said to Teresa, he said, you take this any time you want, Davy. Don't even ask me. And every time she took it, she got totally refreshed. I said, wow. So one day, I started to get weary. Because I wasn't sleeping my normal 12 hours, you know. So I went over to take it, and I felt bad. I emptied it because I thought, what if somebody needs it? Oh well. Just then, Teresa yells to me, "Hey, Just, you got a phone call." Okay. So something said, I put it carefully on the shelf and I put some sawdust around it so that nobody would disturb it, you know, if it was disturbed, I could tell very carefully. I don't know why, you know, it's Sherlock Holmes in me coming out. So I dashed and I clocked myself. Get this, I clocked myself. 90 seconds. And I came back and I unscrewed it, it was filled to the top. I said, not bad, Swamiji. I looked up at the sky. Keep watching over us. A couple of days later, as I was pouring it, it slipped out of my hand and crashed, and there was a glass cylinder inside, and it broke, and I said, Swamiji's coming home. Guess who showed up the next day? And he looked at me, did you enjoy my chai, Justin? I said, yes, sir. Oh, the events.
Swamiji.
Yes, sir.
Are devas everywhere, or are they just there in that area of the Ganges?
No, everywhere.
Are they-
I'd like to be able to call them in.
I would.
Wait a minute, hold it. What is tonight?
Tomorrow's the new moon.
This
Tomorrow.
is
Tonight's
Friday
Friday.
night?
This is Friday and tomorrow's a new moon.
Today's the 3rd.
Okay. I will make a request.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
And tomorrow night, those of you who want to come with
Yes.
me,
yes.
we'll go to the field where the cars are parked, you know, up there. And we'll go there and see what happens.
How do you sleep tonight now?
Not going to.
No guarantees.
No guarantees.
I would have preferred a Thursday,
Yeah.
because that's special, but they may, who knows, you know, as a favor, I'll implore.
Thank you.
Guitar.
Not today.
So remind me tomorrow night.
Oh, you'll get reminded.
Oh, yeah.
What, Swamiji, can you tell us about Mondays and Thursdays real quick? Even though we've talked about it, I just,
There's something about the way the planets apparently line up in our condition and the energies that are emitting from them somehow can endorse your intentions. So I often tell the students, after your meditation on a Monday or Thursday night, when you finally complete your meditation, just sit there. And if there's something you need or a request, perhaps for someone, a friend of yours who's ill or a family member, ask the sages, ask Swamiji if he would, you know, send a blessing, and then just forget about it. Mondays and Thursdays.
Certain times?
At night,
At night.
if you can, at night, yeah, it's best. And face north,
Face north.
always
Not
face
east.
north.
Okay,
Face north. Face.
yeah, face north.
it's a sun girl.
I can't wait till tomorrow. This feels like Christmas.
I'm gonna charge you extra for this, you know that.
Can we bring our iPhones and snap pictures?
They probably won't be
I would
there.
love to do that.
Wouldn't you?
They probably won't be there.
I don't wanna, you know.
Video.
That might jinx it.
Video.
Yeah.
Can you get the picture?
Let's
No,
just-
no, no.
Let's see, who knows, you know.
I don't know.
Wow, that's cool. We're all gonna be sky high tomorrow, waiting for tomorrow night.
Why face north?
The planets line up in a certain, so the energy that goes right to the sages works better. Because I can't go beyond that very crude description.
I guess the real reason is because Swami Rama told you that, so.
Yeah. Hey, it's 9 o'clock,
Oh, yeah.
so I guess we can meditate.